All right, everyone. Well, so to keep to an hour, I think maybe we should probably get underway. Thank you all for agreeing to meet. And again, the reason I'm leading tonight is just to kind of get us rolling. It's not really in my current schedule to do a lot of leading for this, but I feel like we have great capacity among this group and among others who will be interested but can't be here tonight. So I'm sure we'll sort our way through and find leadership and find ways of meeting on a regular basis. So I read through and took some notes on the guide to establishing chapter and various things, so I can be helpful there. But if others have more expertise than I do, I would really appreciate anyone chiming in for that. Let's start with item A, which is to review the agenda. So this agenda is based on Creative Commons recommendation for a new first chapter meeting. It's pretty jam-packed. And I see that Alana has suggested, and we can talk about that as well, that maybe we hold off on doing the election until we establish ourselves a little better and are better able to get the word out to other Canadians that might be interested in being part of the chapter. I feel like this is a preliminary go. So designated note taker. Is anyone interested or capable or feel confident taking notes as we go along?
Barring any other voices, I'll take it on.
Thanks, Helen.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be
my best,
but permanent.
but there's lots of other people who can throw their text into the.
Absolutely, agenda. You know, these kinds of documents are good, fun places for collaboration and adding voices. So please, especially if you're talking about a particular initiative or something that you know a lot about, if you can add notes, that would be really great. So let's do it, and then there's introductions, reviewing highlights of the strategy, election of representatives, and we'll talk about that, selection of chapter lead, which are two different processes and two different people. Discussing the work of the chapter, and here I'm wondering if we can just review some of the things that we know are already going on in Canada. I feel like that would be a good part. Chapter processes and coordination, how to communicate, so that's a really critical issue, I think. Website coordination, and maybe Clint can help us a little bit with that, with what's already happened. Identifying substantive areas of interest and explaining important or sensitive work. So that's our agenda for the evening. Maybe we can scoot down to item 3 and go through some quick introductions. And just, you know, if it's okay with everyone, I'll just read the names in the order that I see them and we'll just walk through. So Alana, can you introduce yourself?
I sure can. I am in Hamilton, Ontario. You have all pronounced my name correctly so far, which is wonderful. My last name is Mayer, like John Mayer, not Meyer, like Oscar Mayer. And I work for a nonprofit called Our Digital World. Mainly what we do is work with archives and libraries to digitize their heritage materials and get them online. So we have a lot of Creative Commons licensed stuff, and we are exploring ways as an organization to get more involved in the open movement. And I'm not really sure where we're going with that yet. My boss would also love to be here, but she just got back from vacation last night. So maybe the next one.
Okay, great. It's nice to meet you, Alana. Helen, how about you?
Hi, Helen Dewar, and I teach at the Faculty of Education in Aurelia, Ontario, and currently an OE Fellow with eCampus Ontario.
And Terry, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Terry. I'm in Guelph, not coincidentally in the same location as Jenny Haman, as we are partners. And I know some of you from my most recent role as having produced Creative Commons Global Summit 2018 in Toronto. And currently I'm unaffiliated, but eager to be involved in the relaunch of the new CCCanada chapter.
Great, thanks Terry. And Zoe, how about you?
Hi everyone, I am joining you from Montreal this evening, but I am not Canadian myself, so please forgive the accent. So I work with the Rebus Foundation. We're a nonprofit who have a couple of projects around open publishing and building software, open source software to support open publishing. My main role is with the Rebus community, and so we are developing a collaborative model for open textbook publishing. So that's really where our focus is, on open publishing technologies, and then reading open content and a few cool projects underway on that front.
Great, thanks Zoe. And Allie, how about you?
Hey everyone, I'm Allie. I'm an open education librarian at the University of Guelph. So what up to my fellow Guelphites? Yeah, so I'm pretty new to this role. I recently taught a course on open education and realized how little I know about CC and how much there is still to know. So really excited to be here and see where we can get.
Great, thanks. Sarah, how about you?
Hi everyone, Sarah Wendorf from Cambrian College in Sudbury, Ontario. And likewise, I'm new to the education field. I'm new to instructional design, which is what I do. And just learning about Creative Commons and open education and realize this is a calling for me in life that I need to be involved in this. So very passionate about it and I'm very excited to meet all of you.
Great, it's great to meet you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Alana, how about you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Elan Poulsen. I am one of the most recent additions to the eCampus Ontario team. I'm the manager of communications and engagement. I came from Western University, where I spent the last 14 years with graduate studies, staff, and I'm still a contract faculty member there. I'm so thrilled to meet everybody, and I have so much to learn, and I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. Thanks.
Thanks. Melanie, how about you?
Sorry, I had some problems unmuting myself. Hi. So I'm the copyright services librarian at the University of Ottawa, and I spend more and more time. I started doing this about 2 years ago, but I realized I spend more and more time talking about Creative Commons licenses and using them myself. So so I'm very excited about hopefully having a Canadian chapter that's active soon.
Great, super nice to meet you. Clint, how about you?
Hi everyone, my name is Clint Lomond. I'm on the West Coast where it's actually 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so not a bad time for a meeting. I am the Manager of Education Technology and Development for BC campus, and I'm also an Associate Faculty Member at Royal Roads in the School of Education and Technology. And I've been involved with Creative Commons for a number of years now and was involved in the previous iteration of Creative Commons Canada, and was also involved in an attempt to reboot Creative Commons Canada just before Creative Commons changed into the new global network scheme, which was at the Creative Commons Summit last year in 2017. So I have a little bit of historical background around Creative Commons Canada, and I'm very happy to see this level of interest in Creative Commons Canada again. So thanks and welcome everyone.
Thanks, Clint. Rajiv, how about you?
Let's see if I can come online. Hello, everyone. So I'm Reggie Gentian. I'm a psychology instructor and the special advisor to the provost on open education at Polytechnic University, just south of Vancouver. Seated beside me is my carpool partner and scholarly communications librarian at KPU, Karen Meyer-Klein.
Great. Thanks, Rajiv. Nice to meet you, Karen. Okay, Molel, and I'm not sure if that's the full name or that's what I'm seeing in terms of alphabet. Hi, we're not able to hear you, Molel. Apologies. Maybe we'll come back to you and move on. Roger, let's go with you and we'll come back.
Hi, I'm Roger Gilles. I'm a copyright librarian at Dalhousie University in Halifax on the East Coast. And I work broadly with Creative Commons and open licensing, along with a number of other copyright issues. And I'm also a lecturer at the Dalhousie School of Information Management. And I teach digital collections there. And I also work with the Public Knowledge Project and other open source, open publishing platform as well.
Great. It's nice to meet you, Roger. I don't think I've met you before. Molel, I thought I heard a peep. Can we come back to you? If not, you can always use the chat window as well to introduce yourself or talk through. And you can find the chat window on the lower edge of the Zoom toolbar. So let's maybe give that a try as well. All right, I think, did we miss anyone? Have we got everybody in the introductions? I think so. Excellent. Okay, great. So as I say, I did a pretty preliminary look at the new chapter guidelines, and I think, and Clint is somewhat experienced with what the past model was, that it's significantly different from what things that Creative Commons has tried in the past and done in the past, and there's really some good documentation around it. So I would recommend reading through. It's a bit, you know, there's some long reads involved about what a network member is and what a country contributor is, those kinds of things that I think will matter going forward for this group. So Alana, maybe you want to talk a little bit about your ideas about holding off on election and what you think we might.
Ooh, big ask. I am in the minority here in that I'm not academic. I certainly have interests revolving around Creative Commons and academic publishing and things like that, but I am, if our organization with me as a representative got involved, we would want to make sure it was more than just open educational resources and scholarly communications.
Right.
And so that is something that I just wanted to throw out right off the bat. We would be interested in helping, but it is important to know what direction everyone wants to go in before we decide to throw in. And, you know, I could potentially be interested in doing social media and website stuff since I'm extremely online and I do that for my job anyways. So it is just a question of defining our areas of interest and things we want to pursue and seeing that representation is broad across the sectors and representing Open Glam and representing creators, as Cynthia suggested. So yeah, generally speaking, define our areas of interest first, pick people to lead us second. Certainly, I love that we're using the eCampus Ontario platform, and that's an example of a great resource and affiliations and things like that that would really propel us forward. So I am aware of that as well. We love having resources. But yeah, just get a bird's eye view of what it is we're going to do and what it is we need and what it is we want before we pick people to lead us.
Right, great. That's, I think those are all great suggestions. And I've realized I neglected to introduce myself. So I'm Jenny Haman. I work for eCampus Ontario as a program manager, and my particular role with eCampus right now is building open community, open education community among post-secondary schools in Ontario. So similar, our organization is very similar actually to what BC Campus does in BC. So that's what I do, and that's why we're currently using the eCampus Ontario Zoom, but it doesn't always have to be that way for a lot of good reasons. And some of the reasons that you suggest, Alana, I think are really important, that this is not just an open education meeting for Canada, that it is Creative Commons, which is a very large umbrella in terms of multiple platforms and multiple types of initiatives surrounding open in a variety of ways. All right, well, does everyone agree? Does anyone have some feedback around maybe making this more get to know each other, get to talk about some of the different areas that we work, rather than doing elections?
Hey Jenny, it's Clint.
Hi, Clint.
I just want to underscore what Alana said, and traditionally what has happened in the Creative Commons Canada chapter has been exactly this. There has been a little bit of an imbalance in representation around Creative Commons Canada. It has been embraced, you know, hugely by education and primarily higher education within Canada. So we often see a lot of meetings that are made up primarily of people with interest in open education, open educational resources. But as you mentioned, and as Alana pointed out, it is a wide umbrella and there are many different facets to Creative Commons. So I just want to echo holding off on making any kind of elections, and perhaps having as a task to come out of this meeting, having us reach out to other areas and other people that we might know of that are outside of education who may have an interest in Creative Commons, to invite them into the fold.
Great, so intentional recruitment for things other than education.
Exactly.
Open education. Yeah, I really agree with that. I think it's really important. Because, you know, and also I think it's tricky to have a national context in Canada, right? So much of what we do, and I think this is maybe not fully understood by everyone in the US, so much of what we do is really relegated to provincial control, provincial mandates, and so on. So having a national chapter can sometimes be a little bit tricky, and maybe we can find ways to ensure that there's good representation from all the provinces, and in multiple languages as well, right? So we're speaking in English, but there's lots of really good language diversity in Canada, and maybe we want to consider some of the ways that we can be more inclusive. And again, inclusive, not my favorite word, still working on that, for other languages. And I know that Cynthia Koo posted a couple of things which I think might also be very important as we talk through and consider things, is to in what ways can this chapter be involved with the Indigenous communities to ensure that what we're doing is part of truth and reconciliation in partnership with them. And I'm not sure if there are other Indigenous and First Nations heritage people here this evening. And I know that I believe that Cynthia is, and I know that she intends to be at future meetings. So would love to hear ideas on how we can do that as well. All right, so if we're gonna move past the election process, and I might recommend or suggest to everyone, if you have a chance to read through what the GNC actually means, all the Creative Commons documentation. There's good documentation that describes all of these things, so we can have a good common understanding of that. And I think, having read through it, a lot of the emphasis is on openness and transparency and inclusivity as part of the work. Although there does seem to be this hierarchy at Creative Commons between someone who is an official network member who's been vouched for by 2 people and has been involved with Creative Commons for a longer time perhaps, and someone who's a country contributor, so participating in the meetings but who's not yet an official CC network member.
Jenny, can I dropped a hand in the chat, but
okay, yeah.
If I could answer a couple of quick things. So just to Clint's inquiry, I'm a member of the CC network, so others might be as well. I think I see Zoe putting her hand up that she is as well. For those of you who would like to know who is in the network, you can actually go to network.creativecommons.org, and there's a directory. You can search by name, you can search by country and city, and it's less hierarchical, and it's more about really the extent of your relationships. So it's really about having established, specific outcomes or specific degrees of involvement or commitment to Creative Commons specifically. So it's not so much about hierarchy, it's just as about in a world of very fluid truths, individuals who are affiliated with Creative Commons being able to get some kind of ground truth on the extent to which a specific individual has or has not been involved with Creative Commons in the past. So that's really what that's about. It's not about hierarchy or authority or anything like that. And then the second thing I'd like to just float is I concur with deferring elections at this time, but I think to your point earlier, Jenny, at some point it would be valuable to get a commitment from somebody on who will bear the torch for let's call it convening at this point, something that's not really part of the governance. So a convener who will kind of coordinate this onward, these meetings towards a taskmaster. There you go, exactly. A convening taskmaster. I think that's important. That's more important than elections, because right now we don't have a structure. And I think that that's something that we need to look at going forward. So those are the only 2 things that I had to say. So I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Thanks, Terry. And I think as part of the election, someone who is the chapter lead ends up being, and my reading of this may be imperfect, but maybe ends up being more like a secretary to the chapter. So doing those kinds of things, as you say, Terry, convening, communicating with Creative Commons, and probably in particular Simeon or Rico, about what the chapter is doing, and receiving information from Creative Commons through Simeon, quite likely.
Sure, and just for everyone's clarity, there's actually 2 kind of levels there's the Creative Commons organization where I actually worked when I was doing the summit. The chapter and network membership is a different scope. It's about something called the CCGN, or the CC Global Network, which is an overall, an overarching governance of all the chapters. And so it's essentially a board made up of delegates from each of the chapters. So the chapter lead for each country sits at that table, and CC, the organization that we know that provides the legal support, et cetera, writes the licenses, they provide through Simeon and some other staff, they provide some sort of staff support and facilitation, but it's really meant that the global network would be self-governing, and as long as they are in alignment with CC's mission statement and CC's goals and CC's communications, then CC would endorse the activities that the network and the individual chapters choose to undertake. And some chapters might be very active and might be in a country where advocacy is needed. And other chapters, you'll look and see that their websites are really just a very lightly localized version of what you'll find on the CC website, because there isn't necessarily a very public foment over copyright at this time. So that's just an important differentiation, which might be incidentally why there have been some false starts with CC Canada, because copyright isn't, well, where copyright is in the public consciousness will drive the level of activity. It could be something that is maybe less publicly present than in other countries.
Okay, great. Thanks, Terry. So maybe what we could do, Clint, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about your experience? Because I think you've been involved with CC for a number of years in a couple of different roles and ways. Can you give us a little bit of background on what has happened for Creative Commons in Canada particularly?
Sure, I can give you a little bit of a background. Going back to when in 2012 is, I think, when I first started getting involved through the organization that I was with, BC Campus. At that time, Creative Commons, the affiliates, one of the primary tasks of affiliates was doing localization of licenses. And so that seemed to be one of the primary tasks and rationales for having country-specific organizations, which kind of went away when the 4 license came out, and that became a much more international license, so it didn't require the localization that that was needed. And so so it was very loose at that time. The people that were involved, there was Athabasca University. It was actually at an organizational level, not an individual level, for Creative Commons Canada, and there were a number of organizations that were involved at that time, including Athabasca University. BC Campus was one of the founding members of Creative Commons Canada, and CIPIC, which is a Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic, I believe, with David Fewer and oh, I can't remember the second person. Kent. Yeah. So those were some of the original members around Creative Commons Canada, but it never really went anywhere. I mean, we were a group in name only. We had a few meetings, but you know, there was no driving force, and there really what there was is no driving project to kind of coalesce a community around at that time. Then when 2 years ago, I guess it was, when Kelsey Merkley had moved back to Canada. She was in South Africa and was quite involved in the South Africa Creative Commons community, had moved back to Canada and wanted to re-energize Creative Commons Canada. So we started working together to do this. But at that time, the network structure was still really informal at Creative Commons, the organizational level. So we did a few things. We had a couple of meetings. We got a new website up and running. We did a logo. We got a Twitter account. And then the new global community structure was announced at Creative Commons 2017 at the Global Summit. And since then, there has been no other attempts to bring together a chapter until today under this new framework. So there's a brief history of activity for Creative Commons Canada.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Clint. Now, Clint, also, I know that you happen to be tapped into a number of, I'm not going to call them projects, but advocacy campaigns, policy, possibly copyright law, and creating petitions and things. Although I see Timothy Vollmer more involved in that than anybody really.
Yeah.
He really, for some reason, keeps his eye on Canada in good ways. To your knowledge, are there any kinds of issues like that have emerged in the past year or so that maybe we should pay attention to?
Well, certainly with the talk of free trade and the free trade agreements, there are certainly copyright considerations there at a policy level that are important. And Michael Geist has been writing quite a bit around this.
Yeah.
That's, one of the things that I think as an organization, we need to keep an eye on copyright extensions that may end up happening under terms of free trade agreements or trade agreements that we have with other countries. I think anything that tries to extend the copyright terms or something that we could as a group, once we get more organized, have a voice in if we wanted to get into that policy level. So that's probably one of the biggest areas. Anytime there's a copyright review, a review of copyright legislation, to be able to have a voice in there, especially, well, this is the direct area that I work in around education, educational fair use policies, things like that. Anytime there's a copyright review, which happens every, I think, 5 years, I think we might be in one. Sorry, I've been out for like the last 6 to 8 months, but I think there is actually a review period happening right now around copyright policy.
Okay. I see Roger put a link in as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And copyright librarians would be pretty familiar with this, I would imagine. And we might be able to do something to recruit someone who works in copyright law as well to join us. I think that there might be good value in that. The other issue that I've seen Timothy Vollmer raise is the issue of open and free internet, which seems very related to Creative Commons, certainly related to their clear mission for making the internet as open and wide open as possible. Do you remember, Clint, what that issue was, or does anyone else remember what that issue specifically is for Canada right now?
Sorry, are you talking about like net neutrality? And
net neutrality, yes.
Yeah. So there is, and there was actually when I started when I was more heavily involved about 2.5 years ago, I did meet with an organization called Open Media here in Canada, and they were interested in being involved with Creative Commons around these kinds of issues, around net neutrality and everything that has to do with the cost of mobile access in Canada. Just access to the internet in general in Canada. So there was a person I was working with at Open Media who had left, and once she left, that relationship kind of fell apart. But there's another organization that we could get involved in if we wanted to expand the mandate from copyright into these other areas, which I would love to see happen as well.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks, Clint. And one of the things that I kind of gleaned from my reading that I think may be important is the difference between individual membership and institutional membership. It's not really clear to me how that might work for a Canadian chapter, or how it works for Creative Commons, for example. I think there's a lot of institutions, or several institutions in Canada, who would consider themselves as institutions members of Creative Commons. But what does that mean in the new structure? Are they also members of CCCanada? And how does that work? And I think what's important about that is the potential, if someone is an institutional member, for example, if eCampus Ontario is an institutional member as part of CCCanada, does that mean that someone who works for eCampus Ontario might be able to do some work for the chapter, so that not everyone is having to put in tons and tons and tons of unpaid volunteer hours? I think there's a lot of burnout that's quickly possible in terms of putting in tons and tons of volunteer hours, and that sometimes organizational participation where there's good alignment for that is helpful for that. So that's just one idea I have.
Jenny, can I speak to that briefly?
Sure.
Since you raised it. One of the aspects of the new structure is there really is no provision for institutional membership. Institutions don't, there's no provision for institutions to be formally affiliated either with CC, unless they're a sponsor, like a corporate sponsor, the way eCampus Ontario was for Summit, or with chapters. Basically, not to be pedantic, but chapters, the idea is that chapters are made up of individuals and that the global network is made up of representatives of each chapter. So organizations like eCampus Ontario or BC Campus or other organizations that are interested in, like open media, for instance, the point of engagement with something like CC Canada would be for an individual from that, and that organization could delegate somebody. We could ask them to delegate somebody if, you know, to become part of CC Canada as a country contributor, but there's no actual relationship between CC Canada and eCampus Ontario, or CC Canada, or sorry, Creative Commons writ large and eCampus Ontario, because the governance doesn't provide for that. It's really about people kind of individually accomplishing things and networking together. And just specifically to what you and Clint were kind of going back and forth on a bit, there's absolutely scope for a chapter to convene, convene meetings and to provide some thought leadership and coordination among different movements in a country where there's overlap with Creative Commons mission and mandate. That doesn't necessarily require a kind of formal relationship. It can really be, it can be part of the scope of the chapter's activity. One of the challenges that chapters really struggle with is the nature of activity, because being individuals, we could, for instance, the idea of having a voice at the table in copyright reform, that's, really, honestly, that's something that Creative Commons has done more than the chapter itself, because the chapter doesn't really have a budget for research. There are all kinds of things that we can do as individuals, but we probably want to keep front of mind exactly what is possible as a chapter in terms of activity. And if there's something we want to accomplish, we might want to think about how can we facilitate that being accomplished by somebody or an organization who has a mandate and a budget to do that. And then lastly, just in terms of what Creative Commons covers, we think about it as copyright, but really the mission of Creative Commons is to have a vibrant commons powered by sharing and gratitude. So it's not even powered by licenses or powered by copyright. The licenses are a kind of point of entry for sharing and gratitude that arise from the nuts and bolts of how the world works around the internet. But largely it's about sharing and gratitude. So it's really about the core aspects of openness. So anything that kind of connects with that, I think is really fair game. And just to Sarah's point, are there local chapters? No, not the governance model. There might be local interest groups, there might be communities of practice, there might be self-organized groups of people. So if in this meeting there are half a dozen people in BC, BC's a real hotbed of all kinds of cool things. And so, there might be a self-organized team of people in BC who would be interested in taking on something local, but there's no formal provision for that in the governance structure. And that's largely because the point of entry for sharing gratitude through the internet is largely around copyright, which is generally a national issue. So there really aren't kind of local or provincial things where that don't bear on the national issues. But people are welcome to self-organize. It's just not on a chapter basis. I hope that answers the questions.
Great. That's very helpful, Terry. Good perspective. So what I'm hearing in some of that feedback is that there may be opportunities to partner or to be communities of practice with interest groups around the activities, the agreed upon activities of the chapter, but it's not really official membership, that's great and that's fine. And I think there's also a little bit of leeway. There's a lot of leeway actually within the chapter to talk about the specific activities that we want to focus our precious time and attention on. So maybe that's an opportunity to talk about some ideas around the activity. And I'd love to hear from people, who haven't spoken much yet about some of their ideas around activities. I know Cynthia Koo had some ideas which are really great start. But does anyone else have other ideas about what kinds of activities the chapter might want to undertake?
Hi, Jenny, if I can add something.
Mm-hmm.
I see an opportunity amongst the educational community in Canada, knowing that there are a lot of interested people in this group right now that are part of education, not to exclude those who are not, but just thinking in terms of an activity that those of us who are involved in education can maybe partner on or come together on.
All right, great, Sarah. And I think if you want to reflect on that and think through some ideas, and anyone else adding those kinds of ideas to the agenda, I think might be really very valuable. Are there any other ideas about activities when thinking about CC Canada as a chapter?
If I can ask, is anyone already active in the platforms, I think is the technical term for the interest groups? We're keeping abreast of the Open Glam platform, which has been really fascinating because it's a lot of people in the Global South. And so those are kind of our two areas that we want to be a little more interested in, and then copyright reform relative to those interests, I would say. But if anyone else is participating in any other platforms, I had been a bit curious as to whether the chapter and the platforms kind of function like iteratively, like people report in from the platforms to the chapter so we can all stay abreast of each other and then we report back out again, where there are like possibilities for collaboration or something. I'm not really sure.
Yes, Alana, I'm part of the CC Open Edu platform, as I imagine several others are. So I think there might be relationship between the chapter and the platforms in terms of the overlap of people who are doing work in those areas. The platforms have their own kind of projects and project funding mandate that they're working through, which I think is different from what a chapter's mandate might be thinking through. Terry, go ahead and be short so we can hear other voices.
Of course, I just want to disambiguate that a little bit further. The idea of the platforms is that they are for people who want to take specific action and who have a really like keen interest in a certain area. They're like they're not mutually exclusive in that you can't be part of both, but they are independent from the network. So people who want to become part of the network, it's not required that you be part of a platform, and vice versa. There are people who might be super active in a platform, but who actually have no interest in the network, because the idea of the network is it's about networking. And the idea of the platforms is that it's about acting, I guess. That's and that those can be independent and you can do one or the other or neither.
Okay.
And yeah.
Thanks, Terry. Is anybody else part of I think there are only two platforms right now, OpenEdu and GLAM, that CC has launched. They have lots of different areas of interest, as we talked about some of them, but I don't think that there are other platforms other than those. Is anyone else working at all with the GLAM team? Okay. So Alana, not so many so far, but again, I think as part of recruiting, we might start to think about that. And I know CC Global has done some very interesting and great work with museums in particular, are kind of the headliners on that in terms of the GLAM platform. But I feel like we have a lot of Canadian opportunities for, as Terry says, networking with our own libraries, museums, archives, galleries, possibly as part of the activities that we undertake. And again, I think that's going to depend on chapter interest in pursuing those activities or individual interest in pursuing them and sharing them with the chapter. Other ideas for activities that we haven't been discussed? All right, I'm hearing some quiet, which is fine. So I do want to work through, just to make sure we work through a bit of our, make sure we get through our agenda for the most part this evening. Chapter processes and coordination, I think, might be a next meeting kind of process that feels very much like it's election related and how we want to think about things. But maybe we can talk a little bit about how we want to communicate. Right now, I'm seeing Slack, CCCanada, the Slack channel, as a primary mode of communication. I communicated also through Canada OER. And again, we're seeing, you know, a lot of educators here, but that's not the only channel we can communicate through. What other ways and means of communicating with each other as a chapter does anyone want to suggest?
It's Clint here. When we set up the CC website, we just created a mailing list, like a sign up for a mailing list. Kelsey was looking after that mailing list and was occasionally doing newsletters for CC Canada from that mailing list.
Okay.
So that may be a possibility if we want to communicate to a broader audience. I can see what, sorry about that, my phone's ringing here. I can see if she still has access to the lists that she had put together. So that's
okay. And were they generated through Creative Commons or were they Gmail? Do you know? Clint?
People who signed up and they signed up through a form on the blog, and then it was in WordPress where we had a mail poet we were using in WordPress to generate newsletters and send those out on a regular basis.
Okay, great. I like the idea of newsletters. I you know, there's sometimes a bit of work to coordinate, but if they're collaborative, it's not as hard, and it does help people keep abreast of the kinds of things they might not otherwise hear about on a regular basis. All right, and I checked Creative Commons website for member nations, and I did see some of the nations have a more or less official Creative Commons list. I can do some investigation and see what that looks like and what it's really actually about. I just don't know what they're doing to create it. Any other ideas on methods, channels for communication with and among each other? All right, I feel like a website would be a nice central place and hub. And I recall hearing in a previous meeting, probably a Canada OER meeting, Rajiv recognizing and mentioning that there are overlapping groups. So there's OOO Canada, which is, I think, part of OpenCon, and Lorraine Chen has been working on that. So there might be some advantage to at least making sure that we're talking with those groups, communicating well with those groups, and again, making sure that we invite that networking from multiple areas and multiple places and spaces. And I know that OpenCon, as Lorraine had been organizing it, I think she hasn't had as much time to do that, has had a nice spectrum of open data, open science in terms of the membership for that, which might have a lot of value for us as a group. Maybe we can move our discussion now into substantive areas of interest. And I think we've identified a couple. So Alana has identified GLAM and archiving, I guess. And Alana, if you want to clarify that in notes, that would be great. And also open education. I think there's a lot of membership around open education, the creation of open educational resources for sure as part of what Rebus community is doing, for example. And also I wanted to touch on, because I had read it and I felt it was important, that in terms of governance and country chapters, for example, CC Canada, Creative Commons would prefer that those who are members and country participants in chapters align themselves from a governance point of view, where they vote and make choices, to one country. So I happen to be a citizen of multiple countries, but I'm going to focus on CC Canada as my chapter. Doesn't mean you can't do work with and for other countries as part of what they're doing, but I think there's some requests from Creative Commons Global that membership in a chapter where you vote is restricted to one country, and that makes sense. Any other ideas that you have for areas of interest? And maybe that's part of recruitment, is to get some ideas from additional Canadians that we can invite. And Canadians overseas are welcome as well if they're not affiliated where they are. So expats also welcome to be part of CC Canada. I see Zoe's already jumping ship. It's New Zealand all the way. It's New Zealand or bust. Great. All right, not hearing much more about substantive areas of interest, and we have time to reflect after this meeting and think through what we might like to know or focus on. And I think we had a good chat with Clint about some of the things that we've been talking about in Canada. Are there any other ideas about things that we have seen or know Creative Commons Global to be doing that as a country chapter we might also want to be involved in? For example, I saw that Creative Commons just got some funding to soup up its technology in terms of CC search and to make sure that that CC search becomes as robust as they can make it in terms of connecting with open databases and open places and spaces around the world, and also creating some community with that. And I don't know, I'm sure they don't know yet really fully what that looks like. And that's an evolving project for them for sure. But if anyone is familiar with any other things that CC Global is currently doing that we might be interested in. And it may take a little bit of research, right? I feel like this is a little bit new for everyone, which is great. All right, I feel like we got through most of the agenda except for the part where we conduct elections. But I think what we might also want to do is think through what's a good time for everybody to meet. It's always the tough conversation. If we're going to have a September meeting, what does that look like? What day, what time? So I'd love feedback about that. Is this day, is Monday evening a good time? Is there something else that people would prefer? And of course, the people who aren't here won't be able to tell us, but we will invite people who are not here this evening to communicate with us through the agenda. And hopefully we can share the recorded video with them as well so they can hear the types of things that we talked about. But I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking.
Hey, Jenny, sorry, it's Clint here. I have a question or an observation. So I've gone onto the CC network site. I've tried this a few times to see if we can find out who are the interested members in Canada that actually are part of the CC network.
Right.
I can't seem to get it to work. Like I log in, I have an account.
Oh, yeah.
I do a search for Canada and it comes up empty. It says there are so has anybody done a successive search there?
I'm not sure that I have. I remember seeing it was Cable's suggestion to do that, but I'm not sure if I did. Creative Commons member login, something like that.
Yeah, Clint, I'm on there now, and when I search for Canada, it brings up 26 hits.
No love for you, Clint.
Yeah, sure. So I can,
you're not really a member, Clint. It's
are you so Clint, just to be clear, you logged in on network.creativecommons.org with the big mustard banner across it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you go to members and then the search.
I go to members and I see 200 viewing, 260 members, but if I try to do a search there.
So if you, in search members, if you just enter the word Canada and hit search, you get nothing?
I get nothing. So what I get is a message that says, sorry, no members were found.
So, so there's two things. I get 26, and then there's a separate link saying, click here for those who are interested in joining the chapter in Canada. And it provides me with a list. So I can actually do a print screen of that.
Can you add it to the commentary?
Yeah, the only reason I ask is, or I bring it up is, if we're going to do another meeting, reaching out to those people who have obviously expressed interest, be able to invite them to a meeting, and we might find, people from other sectors in there. Does the members list have areas of interest?
If you look at an individual, like if you click on an individual entry, there's like a bio and areas of interest have been selected from a drop-down menu. So for instance, I'm looking for you here. So Lalonde, Clint, hold on. No Clint. Hold on. 1 to 26.
You're really not a member, Clint.
Yeah,
you know,
you're actually not coming up here at all.
I don't think I am a member, but I have an account and can log in.
Oh yeah, so that's not the same.
Yeah.
So having a network login is basically like a kind of federated login to CC resources. But I feel like and it's not just here, it's globally actually. There's still a lot of confusion around how membership works. You have to apply to become a member of the network, and you have to find 2 existing network members who will vouch for you, and you have to provide like a bio stating what you've done in open, what your education is, and why you are like to be validated, so that when people go, oh, is this person like actually part of the open movement, they can look at the list and 2 people have said, yeah, Clint's not a Russian spam bot.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I knew that. And, you know, when this all first got set up, I thought that I had been a vetted member, you know, with the work that I had done. I talked to, you know, Kelsey had asked me if I wanted to be a member at the time, but I guess I'm not a member, so I'll apply again. And
our first task as a chapter is to vet each other and get us all into the network.
That's right.
There we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, that's important. That's part of what the networking thing is about making sure that people know who is actually part of the open movement and who isn't. Actually, I mean, as much as that sounds, I don't want that to sound exclusionary, but it's really about being able to say, is somebody actually, do they do anything in open, you know?
Right. And Cable, actually, I talked with Cable about this because he seems to be a good person to talk with at Creative Commons about this. And he really wants people who become members to have been doing this for a little while, to really, and I think and again, it is definitely exclusionary when that's the position that you take. The purpose of why his concern is there is so that CC Global can feel confident that the people who are network members are speaking accurately about the work of Creative Commons, which I totally get and totally understand. So that's why his but if you feel like you've been doing this work a while and that you're, you know, it's your calling. Probably most people who are here, it's their calling. Let's talk about it and make sure that we're honoring the concern that Creative Commons has about who is a network member.
And of course, you don't have to be a network member to either be part of a chapter or to jump in headfirst into a platform, which is why the platforms exist separately from the network. That's exactly that reason, because the network is about recognition of what you might have done in a platform.
Right. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, and one of the things that I want to talk about is when will we meet next? Do we just want to randomly select a date and a time? Is this time convenient for everyone who's actually here right at the moment? 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time?
I think there were some people in the Slack channel that thought it would be, and then didn't. Yes, exactly. Bedtime for kids.
Right, yeah.
And we do want to broaden out from people who can make it to this time.
Right,
so
okay.
Maybe a lunchtime next time, and then something else the third time.
All right. How does Tuesday, September 19th, which is something like a month from now, how does that sound? I know everybody's got to get, many of us have to get back to school and get settled in. And 12 noon for whom, Alana? 12 noon for those of us in the Toronto area is convenient. Is that 9 a.m. convenient for you, Clint?
I could have a 3 p.m. lunch. That's
right.
Basically on par with what I'm doing now.
Right.
Sorry, would that be 9 a.m. Wednesday?
Tuesday, September 19th.
Tuesday, September 18th?
Am I looking at, oh yes, thanks calendar, you're not helping me. Yes, Tuesday, September 18th is what I mean to say.
Yeah, I can make it for the first 45 at a 9 o'clock meeting, so yeah.
Okay, well let's give it a try and then see how we do with those 2 different times and having people chat in the agenda. And maybe after that, if we can include elections at that time, we can find ways to really shake it up in terms of our time zones, which do matter for sure.
And I think one of the things that I can add to the bottom of the agenda is just a chart where people can put their names and then areas of interest or something that they would like to contribute to, so that we can kind of gather that information in a real place.
Great. And what I will do is post, is everyone here at this meeting right at the moment? And I will post in the agenda and in the Slack channel and in as many channels as I can find a link to the agenda, which I think is helpful for everyone. And I will put the Zoom link for the next meeting in there as well. So again, if we're working on recruitment and trying to attract people, we have good information to share with them we've had one meeting, a link to the recording. We're gonna have another meeting on this particular day at this particular Zoom link, if that's helpful. Are there any other ideas about how we can move to the next meeting successfully in terms of attracting additional Canadians and covering as many topics as we, different areas of activity as we can?
There's one notion I have about Canadian organizations, just to pick up where Clint mentioned earlier about open media, I think was the example. I corrected this in the meeting notes, but I misspoke when I said that there was no scope for organizational involvement. Organizations can actually be members at large in their own right of the global network. And so one thing we could do to encourage Canadian involvement, it would be to brainstorm long and hard about what organizations have a stake in what we're doing here, and try to facilitate them attaining membership in the global network, because I think that would go a long way towards helping us get some traction and assistance as needed to make things happen.
Okay, great.
And that's something that we can do proactively, where we reach out to them and say, hey, here's this new structure, we have this Canadian thing, but we would like to walk you through the process so that you can become known to the world of open at large, and we can vouch for you and get you plugged in formally.
Great, okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I do want to stay under an hour because we all have so many meetings in our lives. Any other ideas, please add them to the agenda. Please connect with me if I can be help, if you think that what I've talked about can be any help to what you want to talk about. Let's, again, networking, I love the idea of that. If I don't know you well, I would love to know more about you. I'm looking for a volunteer to transcribe the recording. So I'm going to save the recording and I will post it to a YouTube channel, but we definitely need a transcription, I think, which makes it much easier for people who couldn't attend to easily read through and scan. Anybody feel like they have, the grueling 2-hour time window? YouTube will partially transcribe it, right? So it's at least a good start. All right, I'll leave that to the agenda and to people's imaginations. Let's see how we do. I can probably do it if I can.
Question about that.
Sure.
Thanks.
I'm interested, but I'm not sure how it works in terms of does it go through YouTube first and then I have to correct it?
Yes, exactly. And then you can download it from YouTube. So once you correct it in YouTube, yeah, you have the capacity to download it as a .txt file.
And then correcting it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Jenny, can I throw out a notion here? There are a few of us who've put their hands up, Zoe, myself,
great.
Melanie. Maybe, I don't know if you have the time, but if we could all find a half an hour where you could do a screen flow demonstration of that for us, then we could kind of become a pool of at least 3 people who know how to do it. And then that kind of, because right now you have we could figure it out, but if you could show us in 15 minutes, then that would give each of us the skills we need to at least alternate. Does that make sense?
Sure, great. Yes, I'd be happy to do that.
If you could.
And I'll include that information in the agenda.
Okay, great.
I'll do a quick how-to video. It's a great, it's good. It's really a great service that YouTube does, at least getting us part of the way there.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Who has the website and Twitter account access for CC Canada?
Clint, do you have the website access?
I have website access, yep.
Okay.
I don't have Twitter access right now. That's Kelsey, but I can get that from Kelsey.
Okay, if you would do that, Clint, that would be really great. And if you can ask her about the email and the listserv and the newsletter, like if there's any access to be had, what we can do.
Helen, can I ask you to add something to the list, to the notes? Just my fingers aren't working for typing.
Okay.
I would love for us to, and I volunteer, I'm stepping forward to shoot, help script, edit, and produce a video asset that we can use so that, you know, we can, a 30-second or 1-minute video that explains to people what CC Canada is, what it means to be part of this chapter, as you know, to help disambiguate some of that stuff around whether you're a platform member, contributor, network member, organization, just to break it down and make it really simple without over explaining it, so that people can, you know, in a minute get a clear picture of, hey, you want to get involved, here's what you can do, and then we'll tell you more about it. Because I think that kind of an asset would be great. And obviously starting in English, but it could be something that we could work out in another language. So that's a thought.
I'm seeing that Uji has some questions, but I haven't been able to scroll through to see what they are. I'm saving the chat as well. Public or private YouTube? I have a YouTube account. What I'm hoping, Uju, what we can do is to set up a CC Canada YouTube account. It would be better, I think, for the chapter to have something that's not tied to a particular individual. For now, I will set it there, but I will make sure that it's set to public, and also make sure that we figure out communication channel for videos that make sense to the chapter. No, we won't. Oh, I see. No, comments will not be included with the video, so that the comments are never seen when you record videos in Zoom. I hope that increases your comfort level. Okay, everyone. I think, unless there are other questions, comments, that we've had a pretty good start. And I look forward to seeing everyone on the 18th. And again, and I think if you can include this in the agenda, if you are interested in being either the GNC representative or the chapter lead, there are 2 positions that we'll be talking about and voting on. Please make sure that you make that clear in the agenda. I think that would be great. It's too much for me to take on right now, but I'm happy to be as active as I can be for the things that we're doing, for sure. And I know, you know, Christina Hendricks and several others who couldn't be here this evening might be interested in that as well. We'll make sure we share that information. All right, thanks everyone. Okay. Have a great evening. It was so great to meet some of you I haven't met before. And I look forward to talking with you next time. Laura, hang on, I'm going to share the link to the agenda with Laura.
Jenny, I just want to say thank you so much for stepping up and organizing this first meeting.
Yes.
I really appreciate that you've come forward and brought us all together. So thank you for doing
you're welcome. I love Canadians. We have so much capacity to do amazing stuff. I'm sure we will.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye. Bye. Good night.
All right, bye-bye.